welcome to episode 3 of the Press Forward podcast. If this is your first experience of this new podcast, then we'd like to extend a warm welcome to you, and we hope that you find the stories that you'll be hearing in the weeks to come to be both informative and useful. The Press Forward podcast is brought to you by WP and Up, a charity in the WordPress space with a mission to support our community. Our help is freely available at wpandup.org, or you can call +44 20 33 22 10 80. This support is available for all sorts of reasons. It might be that you'd like assistance with your business, your skills, or possibly with your mental or physical health. Whatever the reason might be, please feel free to reach out. Often we don't like to admit to ourselves that we need support. We sometimes carry on and hope that things will just go away if we ignore them or just work harder. Admitting to ourselves that we'd like support is one thing, but admitting it to others can be another, greater challenge. One of the aims of this podcast is to bring you stories from the community, from people who've been through this process before. They've come to realise that speaking to someone about what they're going through can help. These stories can be very personal, but they shine a light on subjects all too often left in the dark. Perhaps some of the areas that we cover this week are something that you can identify with. You might be facing the same set of events. Of course, it might not be you. It could be someone that you know, a friend, a relation, a colleague. The point is that by sharing these stories and shining a light on them, we make you aware that it's okay to open up, and maybe even seek out some support from WP and Up. To give you some context about WP and Up, we've already provided nearly 800 hours of mentorship, and over 3,300 hours have been donated by the many people who are now volunteering for WP and Up. So we're very serious about supporting the WordPress community, and we're just getting started. If you'd like to help WP and Up financially, then please visit wpandup.org/give. If you would like to get involved in WP and Up, then please visit wpandup.org/contact, or look for the social links in the footer of the website. For WP and Up to carry out its important work, we need your support. That could be just listening to this podcast, or perhaps donating your time or money. Individual donations can be made at wpandup.org/give. Sponsorship is also an option, and sponsoring the WP and Up podcast is a great thing to do. You'll be supporting the important work that we're undertaking, and you will also be featured on this podcast, just like this. The Press Forward podcast is brought to you today by Green Geeks. Green Geeks offers an awesome managed web hosting platform that's built for speed, security, and scalability while being environmentally friendly. Enjoy a better web hosting experience for your WordPress website, backed by 24/7 expert support. And we thank Green Geeks for their support of the Press Forward podcast. The previous episodes of this podcast featured 2 stories from different people. As the podcast is new, we're experimenting with the format and seeing what works best. With that in mind, today we're going to be hearing from just one person, and that person is Paul. He's a WordPress agency owner who has an interesting story to tell. Last year, there was a time when there were too many things going on at once in his life. Some of them were related to home, and others to his agency. Paul was becoming overloaded with all of the tasks that were mounting up, and he was finding it hard to get jobs completed. He speaks about mental bandwidth and how he became saturated. He needed to explore new ways of making sure that he restored a sustainable approach to his work whilst making time for his family life. And so this is a trigger warning that we will be talking about anxiety, stress, and recovery. If you are impacted by this subject, you can skip this section, which is roughly 30 minutes in length. I started by asking Paul if he thought his story was unique, or if he thought that there might be lots of people taking on too much work.
So the thing I'd want to say first of all about this story that I want to refer to is that I don't think that I'm anything special in this scenario. I don't think that I've got like I had a situation that was any more difficult to deal with than a lot of people do. I think that the thing I'm going to talk about today is actually really, really common, and it's kind of a story really about mental bandwidth. It's making sure that you've got mental bandwidth sometimes to deal with crises that can happen in your life and how they can affect your business, your mental health, and everything and the people around you.
I'd not really heard the term mental bandwidth before, but I took a guess that it might mean how much you could realistically take on before you started to become overwhelmed and began to lose focus. I imagined it like somebody juggling balls. This person could cope with a few, but as soon as there were too many, you don't just drop one, you drop all of them, and the juggling completely stops. So I asked Paul if this is what he was thinking too.
Yeah. So imagine, you're running, let's say you run an agency like I do, and you're juggling lots of balls. You're probably already juggling too many balls than you should be. Because it's just the way that seems to go for a lot of us who aren't trained in ways of managing our time really, really super efficiently and learning how to say no and all that sort of stuff. So you've got a certain amount of plates that you can spin, and then imagine that you are literally spinning a bunch of plates with sticks and plates on the top of them. And then a 3-year-old or something just comes into the area where you're trying to spin these plates and starts knocking them all over. You didn't really account for that happening, as you're spinning all these plates. So it's kind of like, how would you deal with that? And you probably haven't got a way to deal with it, and all those plates are going to get smashed on the floor. So mental bandwidth to me is kind of like something that I realized I hadn't got enough of to deal with a crisis that happened in my family, and then to also try and cope with things with the business at the same time.
I think that it's likely that most of us have experienced something like this at some point. Too many tasks and not enough time or energy to get them done. Jumping forwards, I wanted to get a sense of whether or not Paul was able to get a grip of this, whether he has a defined way of ensuring that this does not happen again.
Yeah, it's easier said than done, because we all go into these running businesses, or whether it's you're in a job or whatever it is that you're doing, with lots of optimism. We're hoping for the best, and we are taking risks and all that sort of stuff. So I think it's easy for me to say that in hindsight, after going through a tough period where I didn't have the mental bandwidth to deal with everything. Super easy for me to deal with that in hindsight, and that's why in a way it's something that I'd like to share with other people, so that they don't end up thinking about it in hindsight, so that they've got a little bit more preparation for these sort of things that can go wrong and do go wrong in life, because life just chucks curveballs at you all the time. Some of them you can deal with, and some of them knock the thingy off the stumps, and there's nothing you do, you're out. So that's what I wanted to talk about today, a particular situation that happened to me, and it's still has an effect now. 2019 now? I don't even know what year it is anymore. So to kind of briefly talk about what happened, end of 2016, things are going quite well. In our family, 2 kids, and I'm married to my wife, Lindsay. We've got 2 businesses. One is my web design business, which is, a small consultancy, just me and some associates. And my wife has got a party planning business, selling hen parties and that sort of stuff. And just to kind of fast forward 6 months, it's my 39th birthday, and we've shut down my wife's business. We've drained most of our savings that we were putting aside for a house deposit. And I'm finding myself in the GP's room, desperate for help, confused, shell-shocked, and barely able to string a sentence together when asked the simple question, so what can I do for you, Paul? And then, so it's kind of what can go wrong in 6 months that goes from a point where everything is kind of okay to you're in a complete crisis, your family's in a crisis, your business is in trouble in just 6 months. So January 2017, we have a kind of sudden family crisis, and I'll not go into too much detail, but it was something distressing for us all as a family within our household. And I think it's lots of families have this kind of crisis within their household. And that's the point, that this isn't like a rarity. If you've got kids, you're probably going to have some crisis at some point. Whether it's someone, it can be just someone breaking their arm or something like that, or, having their own problems, whatever, or, a child being ill or whatever. You're going to have some kind of crises in your life. They're going to come at some point. Sadly, they tend to do that. Just to sort of say right now, the situation 2 years on from that is way better. So I just want to get that in, that, we're doing a lot better now and we're managing this crisis pretty well. But for the first 2 months of when this kicked in, things got pretty serious pretty quickly. We had to shut down my wife's business because it was impossible for us to be both working. And she was really struggling with her own kind of time to manage her own customers. And, so while there's a family crisis going on, she's got all of her customers on a case, giving her a lot of hassle, and they're not happy. They're buying a product that is pretty commoditized, hen parties. They're not going to kind of talk to her like we talk to our clients in our web design businesses and stuff. It's a very impersonal relationship. So we decide we need to shut that business down so that we can create a bit of space to help, within the family unit, what we need to do. And that's a very disappointing thing for her as well. That's a really, that affects her mental health, because you feel like you failed when you've done something like that. You've built up a business for a number of years, and suddenly you just simply can't deal with it. And someone could stand outside of that room and watch and say, it's the right thing to do. Don't worry about it. You need to do this for your family and whatnot. But when you're in the middle of that, you can't help but feel feelings of failure. So we were both feeling, failure on that part, her especially. So we've also then just lost half of our income, which wasn't ideal. Through the next couple of months, we burned through all of our savings, and we're having a super tough time of it. Things start actually getting better after about 3 months of this. We're getting help from some authorities, and there's a plan in place, and we're not feeling like we're on our own. Things are on the up in terms of they weren't going continually downhill. So we get to June time, and things are a lot better. Okay, so we spent most of our money, and we haven't got much money and stuff, but things are a lot better, and we're finding ourselves not in constant crisis mode. But what happened at that point was kind of like a shell shock kind of situation. So I think that when you're in the middle of a crisis, a lot of people can deal with it while it's happening. So, if you're in a war or something, I guess, and people are shooting at you, you're going to be in survival mode, and your instincts are kicking in, and there's a lot of adrenaline running and stuff like that. And then, when you come out of that situation, the after effects of that hit you. And that's actually what happened to me in June. Found myself unable to, my business was still suffering because I couldn't finish work. I was so distracted, and all my mental energy had gone. I was absolutely exhausted all the time. I couldn't finish work. We'd only got one income. And if you don't finish work, and if you run a web agency, you don't get paid. I found myself in a kind of secondary crisis. And I honestly think this must be a really common thing, because I've talked to other people about it. That you go through the crisis, you think you're okay, you put all the wall up, and then the wall comes down when you start to relax a little bit. And that's when it's the same as when you kind of go on holiday, you work really hard, you go on holiday, and then you immediately get the flu because your defenses have come down, and same kind of thing. So that's where I ended up. And how I ended up in the doctors is the day before my birthday. I was watching some Dopey Elevation 101 ways to elevate your business videos on YouTube. I was just sitting in bed with my laptop working and watching these videos. And then a video with Mike Killen comes on because it's just going through a playlist. And I didn't really know Mike at that point. I know him a little bit now, obviously, and stuff, but I didn't really know who he was. I just knew he was a coach of WP Elevation. And it was a video that he'd done for Mental Health Week of that year. And he talked about his own mental health journey. And I watched this video and I suddenly had the realization that I was absolutely not okay. It was one of those moments where I was just sitting, watching YouTube, and then suddenly there was tears in my eyes. And I was just absolute exhaustion just poured out, just complete exhaustion. It was day before my birthday. Fortunately, I made a decision on that day based on what Mike said in the video to go and seek some help. I felt awful on that day because I had a real realization, the things he was saying. I had a realization of how bad I'd been. I felt bad, as a father and a husband to my family, because I'd been so intensely focused on dealing with this crisis and then trying to recover my business after that. I realized my personality had just disappeared. The jolly Paul had disappeared. There was a jolly Paul on social media. You could see me on Facebook and I'd be all happy and whatnot and posting videos and saying funny comments and posting GIFs and talking to my friends online. But that was where I was escaping to. In my family life, I'd become a really withdrawn, not a very fun person to be around, angry, easy flip out of my children if they'd done something wrong. Even if they hadn't done something wrong, if a client had upset me, they'd take the blame. Wasn't really communicating with my wife very well. And it all hit me watching that video that I'm heading for ruined business, maybe even a divorce if I don't sort this out. I need to sort something out. I need to make some action. So that's when I took myself to the doctor. Went to the doctor on my birthday. It was the day after. And the doctor was like, "So how can I help you, Paul?" And that was it. Just the floodgates opened. I don't think he even understood what I said, because I didn't even understand what I said. But that's when I went to the doctors. And what actually happened then was the doctor asked me, he said, and he was really nice, and he said, "What do you think we can do to help you?" And he acknowledged, he said, "Look, you've told me what's happened. You've taken some knocks. You're not supposed to take these knocks, and you're not supposed to have to take those knocks and absorb them all by yourself. You've taken this on yourself. You've taken all this responsibility, and you're trying to absorb it all yourself, and you're not sharing it with anybody." He didn't actually say that, but that's how I interpreted what he said. He said a much shorter version of that. He said, "You've taken a lot of knocks, and you need a break." He said, "How can I help you?" And I'd known from some people that I knew that in my situation, I'm not very, what's the word? If you leave me to my own devices, I probably won't go to the gym, for instance. I won't practice mindfulness unless someone is there going, "Practice mindfulness right now." I will just quickly go back to whatever it was before. I'll go home. Hey, Lindsay, to my wife, "Hey, doctor spoke to the doctor. He said I need to be more chilled out about this, blah, blah, blah. Yep, I'm going to do that." And then within 2 days, I'll be shouting at everyone again and upset and, wanting to walk away from businesses and whatnot. So I just said to him, "Look, I think I need some medication." He agreed and prescribed me some medication that helps just rebalance the negative effect of the chemicals that being stressed, anxious, angry puts into your system. And then you take a while to come down from that. So when you are, got stress, anger, and it's all compounding like that, and you're also self-loathing because you're aware of what you're doing to other people, you're aware that you've been an absolute, a not very nice person. It just keeps going. The negative chemicals are going in, and there's all the stuff, the endorphins, the good stuff is getting drained. It's getting absorbed super quickly, and it's not there. So I had some medication that just slowly just helped to correct the complete imbalance as a result of the kind of catch-22 vicious circle of being stressed, anxious, self-loathing, all that stuff. The more that goes in a vicious circle, the more bad chemicals that get produced. So I ended up having some medication that basically helped fight the imbalance within you so that you could start fighting your problems, your stress, your anxiety, the business problems on a more even, on a more fair fight level. And that worked for me. That's not the solution for everybody. I've heard one of your other episodes, and it wasn't a solution for someone else. They went down a different route when they had some problems. But for me, that was, a good solution for someone as terrible at kind of following through with, advice other than just popping a pill every day. But just doing that just put me on the right track. It made me aware. It reminded me every day that there was something I was working towards, rather than forgetting about it quickly and going back to my old habits. And they worked as well, And 2 years later, when we're, almost 2 years later, and I'm on my last pack at the moment. I'm on the pack of pills that is when you're on the way out of taking them. So it's like the safety one where, you're just taking them so that you don't get some unwelcome side effects of taking coming off those sort of things, because your body's been used to them for such a long time. So you're kind of replacing your natural happiness and your natural ability to think positively about things. But when you're in a crisis, the ability to just say, oh, it's all fine, I'm just going to, just always look on the bright side of life type stuff, it's just not there. It's not there. So that's what happened. And, we were talking about doing this podcast on Facebook the other day. And so I mentioned to you that I kind of, while we're talking about it, it brought back 2 years of kind of flashback. I just had this overwhelming feeling that I needed to apologize to my family. So I went and apologized to Lindsay. I was in floods of tears. This was yesterday, was it, or the day before? I don't know, like a couple of days ago. But actually, it was a realization that I have come through the other side of this. And making that decision, 2 years ago on my birthday, meant that my business recovered. We did some amazing things we started a new agency, Dicky Birds. We did some amazing things with some good brands in WordPress, and cool things happened, basically. Cool things happened that didn't happen and were never going to happen when I was in such a negative, angry frame of mind. So the message really is that these small things, these things that feel like you can deal with them, you've got to be absolutely honest with yourself. If you talk to someone that you know and say, am I dealing with this okay? If they tell you that you're not, then listen to that. It might feel that it's not something you want to hear because you've got work to do then. But it's not going to get better by itself in most cases. If you want to find the old version of yourself that you remember being the happy, chirpy person, then you've got to do a little bit of work towards that. And that can just be going and speaking to someone. So that's the round trip of the story in terms of my personal side of things.
Going back to the start of Paul's story, you may remember that it wasn't just him in the middle of all of this. His whole family were involved. I wanted to know if there was any recognition at the time that a head of steam was building up. It's all too easy to take the approach that it's best just to soldier on and everything will be okay. So, were there any warning signs that, with hindsight, it could have been good to recognise?
My wife was much better at realising these sort of things, and so she's much better at adapting her mindset than I am. I knew it was happening, but I ignored it. I just totally ignored it. And in fact, I was in complete denial about it. And to put on top of it, my pride got in the way. I really thought that I could handle all this pressure, and I could deal with it, and it was going to be okay. And I kind of wanted it. I wanted to take that responsibility, as kind of the so-called man of the family. It's just that male pride thing kicking in. I'm not going to quote it, but I think if anyone's seen Pulp Fiction, it's what Marcellus Wallace tells Bruce Willis's character to do about pride. And it can get in your way because it can be embarrassing. You look around and you see, your friends or your kind of old school friends or people around you or just people you walk past in the street, and they look like their lives are going fantastic, and you don't have a clue what's going on in their lives, quite honestly, and it might not be going fantastic, and you shouldn't feel good about that as well. But you start just looking, and feeling like it's a failure, and sometimes the best way you feels like you can deal with a failure is to just pretend that failure isn't there. And the biggest failure I made was just not being honest with myself. just not being honest with myself and being honest with the signs that were clearly there that I was not having a good time. And as a result of me not dealing with it, I was making life much worse for my family and my friends. And I actually want to apologize to all my friends. I'm not talking about my WordPress friends on Facebook and stuff because they didn't really notice. They wouldn't have noticed because my online version of me was different. It's the optimistic side and stuff. But I've got friends who I just disappeared. I've disappeared for 2 years from some of my friends. My family, I've disappeared from some of my family for 2 years. I've got, members of my family who asked me for help with websites and stuff like that, and I just blanked them. I just disappeared and avoided them. I've got friends who are still sending me messages. Do you want to come out? I'm supposed to be going out tomorrow evening. I know I'm not, but they're still asking me, thankfully, to come out. And they'll never listen to this, but I feel sorry about that. I wasn't able to get myself my own help quicker, so that I wasn't, having a negative effect on so many relationships around me. I'm super lucky because I think that I can just rebuild those relationships with those friends and just be honest with them and tell them. You realize the damage you can do to yourself if you don't spot signs and do something about it.
I noticed that Paul drew a distinction between his real-world friends and his online friends from Facebook and other social platforms. Paul thought that his online friends would not be able to tell that he was facing a tough time because he was only displaying an unrealistic representation of himself. Increasingly, these social platforms make up our real friends, whether we've met them or not. I started to wonder if we're all guilty of posting only the things that we want other people to see, only the very best of ourselves. If we're all doing this, then it can appear that the world is just made of success. There is no failure to be seen anywhere, and all of our friends are constantly doing better than we are. I asked Paul if he thought this was a problem.
The social media side of things was kind of like the comfort to me because I was able doing some, what you call giving back stuff. I was helping people online, sharing as much as I could. And it was a rabbit hole to go down online in social media because I was getting positive feedback. Whereas in most other areas of my life, I wasn't getting much positive feedback, or I probably was, but I wasn't taking notice of it. You look in the wrong places sometimes. But in that time, I know for a fact that over the last 2 years, my online profile has improved. I've got a bit of an online profile and a few people know who I am and stuff like that. And you get invited to some things and some doors open. But that's exactly what you said, that, I think that some people probably come across some of my sort of content where I've been online and podcasts, whether it's talking about user experience or WordPress things or whatever it might be that I've spoken about online in podcasts and videos and whatnot. I think that I've got it absolutely nailed, and they're like, I'd love to have an agency like Paul's got, that seems he's really got it nailed. He knows what he's talking about and stuff. But that's the thing, there's what people see. And even if you don't try and make them believe something, they will see the positive side in what's going on. They will see the highlight reels because everyone looks for the highlight reels online. And the truth is, that's not what it was like at all. I have got a good agency, but by no means is it, killing it. It's not. We're not kind of like leading the way on how to run an agency or anything like that. We're not at all. But and that is one of the dangers. Is that someone can. I would never want someone to feel bad about themselves comparing their own company to my company and the work that we do.
Paul mentioned earlier that after he had begun to recover, he entered a phase in which he was unable to complete his work. I wanted to know more about this. What did he mean that he could not finish projects that he'd started?
I think it was a compound issue of a number of things. I think in the middle of the crisis, I'd found a lot of ways to distract myself, whether that was, things online, in the world of WordPress and stuff like that, anything to distract and, just take away the facing the reality of things. So I'd figured out I'd picked up some terrible habits. It's kind of like I'd got such a high level of adrenaline every day through trying to, us trying to be prepared for anything any day, because things were, could spin on its axis on a day and go really terribly wrong, and then the next day could be really good, and then you'd feel like you're going in the right direction, and then the family crisis would literally spin up within a few minutes, and it would all be, and all the plans had gone wrong. I think that you end up prepared for things that aren't happening. So, things are on the up, and you're in this constant expectation that something's going to go wrong at any moment. I think it's, a bit like when you kind of walk down a dark alleyway. You can't see anyone, there's no one around, but you're kind of aware. So you're on the edge, and you're ready for action, ready to run or fight or whatever it might be. So I think you can end up after a situation like this with almost permanently a state of fight or flight, even when nothing's going on. And I think that's what most people associate with anxiety and anxiety attacks and stuff like that. So not so much stress, but a kind of the default setting of every day when you wake up is anxious. And you don't even know what it's about. It's just that your body has become so expectant that something's going to kick off today, that you're ready for it. And that is an exhausting thing to deal with. So I remember Jim Galliano said this, a great guy. He said, whatever it is that you're focusing on all the time, that's where your energy goes. So I wasn't focusing, subconsciously, I wasn't focusing on trying to get my work done. I was subconsciously focused on, I hope nothing goes wrong today and we don't go back to how it was 2 months ago. And then combine that with the bad habits you've kind of put in place to distract yourself from, the stuff that's going wrong and everything. And then you find that you just got no energy left to finish the work. You've got no energy left to come up with the good ideas. You definitely haven't got any energy to come up with like a strategy that puts milestones in a project that makes it go nice and efficiently from the beginning to the end. You're just chipping away. You've got all the wrong tools in your mind. Your mind has got all the wrong tools to get the job done. So I think that's what it is. It's a mixture of post-trauma. I guess it's kind of a version of post-traumatic stress. I don't know if that's the official version, but that's how it feels, post-trauma stress and anxiety.
Getting back to the central thread of what Paul had been talking about, I wanted to know if he had found something that had alleviated this from happening again. Perhaps a system at work, or a new way of dealing with his family.
It's work in progress, I'll say that. If my wife was listening to this, she'd be like, at this point, Paul, don't lie. Because the lie would be, I've done this, and this, and everything's cool. But actually, I'm a sort of one step at a time sort of person. And the first thing, like I said, was the initial help was the medication for me. That was what basically just leveled the playing field and allowed me to actually start doing anything sensible in any sort of direction. So that was the first step. I found I would get a lot of satisfaction and a lot of feeling of well-being from trying to give back to the community. So I try and spin negatives into positives in stuff. If we can donate some money to something, or if we can do some work for free for someone that we think is a good cause, or that kind of thing, or we can see someone struggling with something and I want to help them, or just sharing, even if it's stuff like this. I get a lot of satisfaction from trying to help others with the mistakes that I've made, or the things that I've done right. A lot of the time it's the mistakes. That's something that I'm just going to continue to do. Create content, talk about stuff that I think is worthwhile sharing, look for opportunities to help charitable causes when we can from time to time. The benefits of when stuff goes wrong and your clients are not happy with you because you're not doing a good job for them as you normally are, of knowing that you have still got something that is of great value is very, very soothing. So while everything is going wrong, you helped someone today. So it wasn't all bad. Someone had a problem, you helped them with it. It might, you saved them 5 hours frustration by just writing a quick comment on Facebook, or you made a video and someone watched it and then some people sent some comments saying how amazingly helpful it was, or you went on a podcast, whatever, and someone said they really enjoyed it and it helped change their mindset. That is so fantastic to fall back on at those moments when you feel like you're not offering anything to the world, and that what's the point? What am I doing here? That's something that I advise to anyone. Have an abundance mindset. We are in an industry where that exists. We're not in an industry. We're not in the pharmaceuticals industry where we can't really share the amazing discovery I made today, because that's not going to work. You're going to end up sued or something like that. In our industry, we can share stuff and we can share our best skills. And yeah, that might end up. It's very unlikely, but one day it might end up that you end up losing a job to someone who learnt your skill and beat you to a project. But I think it's unlikely. So yeah, the giving back and the mental bandwidth thing is the key thing to me. It's, I realized that the way I was running my business was not sustainable. Being just one person trying to grow and do more and more and more, and then take on recurring income. Everyone wants recurring income, but that's recurring support as well. That's recurring time that you keep giving to people. Recurring problems that will keep appearing in your inbox. And so during that time, I did get re-energized, and me and my old business partner Peter reformed our old agency. So I'd previously been running as WP Blueprint, and we decided to reset up our agency, the Dicky Bird Studio. And the idea was to start combining a few different people's skills together to share the burden of earning the money and to expand on what we could offer without having to basically just try and stretch one person's capacity all the time. And like I say, we haven't got that nailed yet, but we're going in the right direction. We're building a small but loyal and good team. And I'm still super busy all the time, but it's not all on me anymore.
The Press Forward podcast is brought to you today by Green Geeks. Green Geeks offers a specially engineered platform that offers WordPress users web hosting that is designed for the fastest, most secure and scalable hosting available in multiple data centers. Their WordPress hosting makes deploying and managing WordPress websites easy with automatic one-click install, managed updates and real-time security protection. SSD RAID 10 storage arrays, Power Cacher and expert 24/7 support to make for the best web hosting experience. And we thank Green Geeks for their support of the Press Forward podcast. That's it for this week. Please let us know if you're enjoying the podcast, if you're finding it useful or helpful. Perhaps you have an opinion on the format of the podcast and whether it's been better to have one guest instead of two. You can reach out to us anytime at wpandop.org/contact. Remember, there's a serious point to this podcast though, and that is that WP and Op is here to provide help and support. That help is available for you or people you know and can be easily accessed at the wpandop.org website. Please spread the word about this new podcast. Tell your friends and subscribe on iTunes or your favourite podcast player. So until next time, #PressForward.